who take such good care of people that
Exactly.
people finally say, you know, I'm feeling so much better. I'm going to go home. So they have a party.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And about 15% of people disenroll from hospice as a result of improved well-being, you know. So that's one of them. Another one, of course,
and
is
let
that...
me just one more, because the power of this. Hospice started where I live in Connecticut,
That's right.
in Branford.
Yeah.
And what it meant, though, like the first day it opened its door, was you go there to die. So when somebody would say, okay, we'll let you go to hospice, literally people got in the car or an ambulance and died on the way there.
Wow.
It was so powerful to realize, you know, what the fact meant to them. You're going to hospice. And that's when Elizabeth Kubler-Ross became a friend of mine and everything else. You know, we really got into the fact of how the mind means something to people. Because if the car pulled up in front of your house with the name hospice on it, oh, I'm dead. You know, and now it has a very different
but a lot
meaning.
of people, I mean, this, like the lady in my book, she was on a chemo that really she had a terrible reaction to, and she was skeletal, and her family thought she had just weeks, and so she goes on hospice, and everything turns around. So another one of the myths is that hospice covers round-the-clock home care, and unfortunately this is not true. Hospice workers will come into the home to visit, the nurses, the doctors, the social worker, the PT, but they're not going to be there changing the diapers or feeding somebody. And that's why I really emphasize in the book the importance of having a tribe to deepen your relationships with your neighbors and your friends, to do favors for people when you can, to mentor people who are younger than you, to do all these things, because people who have a good, rich social network are more likely to have the hands-on care from their friends that they are likely to need as they're going through their dying process.
My wife was home all the time. I mean, there were times she'd go to the hospital and if something acute happened, but otherwise with palliative care, they called it, and all these wonderful people came and spent the day, and then we'd tuck her in at night and get her up in the morning, and as when everybody came again, at 9 in the morning.
Yes, and there was a really beautiful story on TV about a rural community in Utah where a woman had multiple sclerosis, and I think she was living alone or with the help of a daughter or son, and all the neighbors got together, and all these men, like I think a huge group of men, like 10 or 20 men, all rotated, and each of them would take a shift in the evening and help put her to bed. And that made it possible for her to continue to live at home for, I think, many years. And in the end, the men in the community were almost fighting over to have a slot to put her to bed. And I think it was a beautiful thing for them, as men too, to learn to be good caregivers.
Yeah, let me add something I had to learn. Traveling to every state in the Union, I have. And you learn something. Upstate Maine, Montana.
Yes.
Everybody knows everybody else.
Yes.
Because if something goes wrong, your neighbors come. I mean, in one place, you blew your horn on the car endlessly, and then all the neighbors drove over knowing you had a problem. But it really impressed me because the attitude towards the patient was so different in Montana than in New York. And you'd think, New York, all these wonderful cancer centers, but Montana has a better survival rate than New York. And I'd say the same thing in upstate Maine.
Exactly, and I think those of us in blue states who think we're so sophisticated, we have a lot to learn from the rural people in red states around neighborliness and mutual obligation and community. A lot. It's beautiful, and I think it's quite humbling.
Yeah, I learned
so those are,
when our car broke down in New York, in Manhattan, and the cops went by without even stopping to see if we're okay, we'll send somebody. Car broke down in the middle of nowhere in Texas. Somebody pulled up and said, what happened? I said, well, the car stopped working. Oh, my brother's a mechanic. I'll get him. You come with me, and your wife, and you'll have dinner at our house while he fixes your car.
Beautiful. Yes, beautiful. And I think the more we get back to that kind of spirit, which is, it builds our own self-confidence when we help out other people like this and go the extra mile for other people, we feel better. We feel better physically and mentally, and we have more confidence in ourselves and in our community and less fear. And I think all of this will help us have a better process through the ends of our lives, which of course we're all going to go through at some point. Another problem with hospice, however, is that there's certain diagnoses where it's relatively easy to get into hospice, and I recommend getting into hospice, or as you said, palliative care, even better, earlier and sooner rather than later. But there's some diagnoses that move so slowly that it's hard to get into a hospice program. And a lot of people need at-home health care, and they don't necessarily have the money to pay for it out of pocket. And I think this is, again, it's a gap in our social safety net. We really ought to provide health care and home care at home for everyone who needs it, so they don't have to go into the hospital to get a certain level of care or respite for their family.
Right. There's a lot of
and I think that's another reason why people often have better health outcomes on hospice, because they're not having to, ferry themselves from office to office to office when they're already fragile and very easily fatigued. So it's
add another personal story. My father-in-law fell and was quadriplegic. But he was such a wonderful man, despite all his disabilities. I mean, he couldn't do anything. He just had a sense of humor and lived to 97.
Oh,
I was trying to get him to live to 100 so he'd get on television. But then I thought, think what I'm trying to do. He's quadriplegic, and I want him to live 3 more years. So one night, he said to the family, his wife, his daughter, myself, enough. He said, I'm not having dinner, and I'm not taking my pills. And he died quietly that night.
Wow.
But
it's
if
fascinating.
you let me drive him crazy, we would have kept him alive, you know what I mean? Yeah. His advice for seniors is fall on something soft, because that's how it happened, his injury. Fall on something soft.
It's amazing. My mother was like that too. She was a very decisive person all her life, and she had heart problems, and she had quite consciously rejected open heart surgery at the age of 84. And she knew she was going to die within a year or so. And she had something like a heart attack, we don't really know, and she was taken to the hospice unit of the local hospital, and she just said, I want to stop eating and drinking, I want to die, and I don't want to go back home again. And she died that night. She sent my brother off to make a phone call to me and my other brother, and when he came back, she was dead. But it was so much the way she had lived. She was a very, very decisive.
A switch. I always say it's like turning the light off.
Yeah.
Your mother could let her body know, I'm turning it off. Yeah.
Yeah. And she was done. And it was shocking for me, but I also had to realize she really had died the way she wanted to die.
Right.
It was not necessarily the way I wanted her to die. I wanted to have a chance to fly out and say goodbye to her and see her before she actually died. But
then we're imposing
that wasn't actually what she wanted.
Yeah. That's why I thought later, when I'm saying to him, you got to live a few more years, who am I to have make him live in his condition, just because I want to get him on television, and so he's smart enough to say no, enough is enough. And the other thing, the spiritual part. When my mother-in-law died, I used to have lunch with her and drive her crazy, to get her to laugh, and she's a wonderful spirit. Because even in the midst of sitting in a wheelchair with enormous problems, I said to her, what can I pray for you? I wanted to do something. And she said, world peace. Can you imagine someone with every problem in the world saying world peace? It blew my mind. And boy, did I respect her as a person. But the day she died, it was about 11:30. I knew it because she came and said goodbye to me. I don't know how to describe it. It was like this little sort of spirit cloud over my head saying goodbye. And I said, oh, she's gone. So I jumped up, got in the car, drove to her nursing home. And I walk in, and the nurse sees me and says, oh, you've heard. I said, I didn't hear. I know.
Yeah.
But that's the stuff. When you live it, you don't argue about it. That's why I say the stories, nobody can say that really didn't happen. It did.
Exactly.
And, the reason I say 11:30, I thought she looked at her watch and said, oh, if I don't die now, he'll be here.
Yes, and I hope this is the beauty of my book, which is called The Art of Dying Well, is to help people get back in touch with this intuition, this spirituality, the things they want to have guide their lives, their declines, even their deaths, and not to give. I think we've delegated the management of dying to medicine, and medicine does a much better job of preparing, of warding off death and preparing people for peaceful death. And we need to re-own this very intuitive knowledge that people had up until the 1900s, when medicine started to be much more effective, which of course has been a wonderful blessing for all of us. But we need to, it's almost like a double awareness, I think. We need to enjoy and love our lives, and at the same time be willing to accept the reality of our deaths and allow ourselves to trust the kind of things you're talking about, Bernie, the intuitions, the messages from elsewhere. I think
Yeah, I was going to say...
It's a perfect way to end the show. That's it for now. Stay tuned for the next episode of Mind Health Matters next time around.
Join us next time on Mind Health Matters with Dr. Bernie Siegel. Until then, remember, be fully engaged in life, loving every moment as your unique self. In going deep within to discover ourselves, we can also discover self-love. Then, when we let our hearts make up our minds, we connect what our bodies do so well to the power of love. We can boost our ability to grow and heal along with our self-esteem. The sense of empowerment that results from this mind-body connection is one related to self-induced healing. When you add spirit to that connection, making a mind-body-spirit connection, you nourish your soul. For more insight, go to BernieSiegelMD.com.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.